The Galactic Ascendancy watched the Sol system with academic detachment. To them, Earth was an unremarkable blue marble inhabited by a bipedal species that had barely left its atmosphere a few centuries ago. Humanity had no true presence in the wider galactic sphere. They had no colonies beyond a dozen mineral-rich moons, no political weight in interstellar forums, and certainly no fleet worth mentioning. The Ascendancy saw them as they would a child drawing diagrams of warships with crayons, amusing, a curiosity at best. Protocol dictated they assess emerging species before allowing any formal introduction into the larger galactic structure. Usually, the process was straightforward: observe, evaluate, engage. But something about the humans defied their models. The observers began to notice strange trends. Human data streams, though encrypted, were saturated with simulations, conflict records, and wargame philosophies that far exceeded their technological position. They didn't posture for power. They prepared like they expected war to be inevitable. Most species evolved past such instability. Humanity seemed to evolve deeper into it. So the Ascendancy sent a diplomatic fleet, not to initiate peace, but to evaluate the threat. 7 ships, each equipped for both first contact and military defense, warped into the outer rim of Sol space. They expected orbital defenses, scrambled transmissions, a panicked mobilization. Instead, they found silence. And then they saw it, a single vessel on an intercept trajectory. It was unlike any other. Over 5 kilometers in length, the ship bore no standard broadcast ID, no escort signatures. It didn't hide its presence. It didn't jam signals or power up weapons. It moved with the deliberate pace of inevitability. The humans had sent one ship. The alien commander, a strategist-class officer named Vile, viewed the incoming vessel with mild amusement. "One?" he asked aloud, not bothering to suppress his laughter. "Are they mocking us?" His adjutant offered theories: decoy diplomatic envoy, relic of a defunct fleet, but none explained the ship's staggering energy output. It radiated more power than any warship they'd ever encountered, yet it emitted no active threats. Vile dismissed the danger. One ship was a gesture, and gestures were meant to be ignored or crushed. They named it Trident based on partial translations of human fleet records. The name matched its 3-pronged engine flares and tiered hull design. It looked ancient and new at the same time, like someone had resurrected an old god in chrome and fusion. Still, it was alone. The Ascendancy fleet maintained formation and scanned it openly. No cloaks. No shields. Primitive. Predictable. It didn't respond to pings or standard contact hails. Silence. Yet it advanced. The council back on Viral Prime received Vile's report and scoffed. A species that sends a single vessel to meet a diplomatic formation is either arrogant or ignorant, one of the senior members said. Perhaps both. They approved a low-level engagement. Nothing hostile. Just enough pressure to make the humans talk. Meanwhile, intelligence officers struggled to explain anomalies. The Trident's hull disrupted spectral scans. Its fusion core operated on a cycling waveform that resembled something theoretical, quantum layering or temporal mirroring. The data made no sense. So the scientists scrubbed it, labeled it corrupted, and told the admirals what they wanted to hear: outdated tech, oversized reactor, inefficient propulsion. One officer muttered under his breath, "They sent a monument, not a warship." No one corrected him. Humanity, for its part, said nothing. No warning. No diplomacy. No fear. This unsettled some in the Ascendancy fleet. Sentient species responded to threats in predictable ways: panic, submission, aggression. Silence was alien. Silence was dangerous. Vile, feeling confident, authorized the first transmission. It was polite, formulaic, non-threatening. To the Terran vessel, "You are entering protected space under Council watch. State your purpose." The message bounced off the Trident's surface like a pebble hitting a glacier. No reply. One of Vile's tacticians asked if they should ready a pulse cannon, just to show strength. Vile declined. "Let them make the mistake. We'll respond accordingly." But deep in the ship's analysis chamber, the AI feeds had already begun to raise alerts. Not about Trident's power. Not about its weapons. But about its behavior. "It's on a straight course," one AI reported. "Not adjusting, not correcting. It knows our position and it's still coming. That's not ignorance. That's confidence. Another AI interjected. We're not observing it. It's observing us. Every scan we make, it reflects back exactly what we want to see. Confusion turned to friction. Friction to quiet panic. Why did they only send one ship? If it was symbolic, it shouldn't have carried the energy signature of a star. If it was a bluff, it shouldn't have such intentional silence. Bluffing species talked too much. This one wasn't talking at all. Aboard Trident, humanity made no attempts to escalate. They didn't need to. Because they already knew the first contact had failed. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an autopsy report waiting to be filed. Still, the aliens couldn't stop watching. Couldn't stop scanning. Couldn't stop trying to fit the Terran puzzle into their tidy boxes. And as the ship drew closer, one last question began to take root in every alien mind watching the data streams. What if it wasn't that they only sent one ship? What if they never needed more? Inside the Trident, every motion was calculated. The crew of 312 operated in total synchronicity, each trained not just in their task, but in understanding the philosophy of conflict itself. No one spoke unnecessarily. Noise was weakness. They had long passed the need to narrate their efficiency. Humanity had sent one ship because one was sufficient. Not as a statement of arrogance, but because redundancy was irrelevant. Captain Elias Reyes stood before the core interface, watching alien fleet data cascade across the transparent screen. The alien ships moved in predictable formations, broadcasting their presence with the kind of bravado seen in species that had never known defeat. No jamming, no misdirection. They assumed visibility equated to dominance. Reyes said nothing as he tapped through telemetry overlays. Every ship's weapons, shield fluctuations, energy pulses, all of it exposed. Patterns predictable. Weak points static. Psychology linear. Trident didn't carry nuclear payloads or kinetic rods. It didn't need conventional offense. Every system on board had one goal: conclusion. Not conquest. Not intimidation. Finality. The ship adapted in real time, its systems built on quantum-threaded neural AI, an evolution not of programming, but of understanding. It didn't simulate responses. It perceived intent. Reyes reviewed the alien transmission logs. Their message was formal, almost polite. That was expected. The aliens still believed in rituals. They followed first contact doctrine like it would shield them. They waited for responses. Reyes offered none. He wasn't here to parley. He was here because Earth had authorized observation, intervention only if provoked. So far, the aliens had offered no direct aggression. But they had crossed the Proxima line weeks ago. That was sufficient. The crew knew the implications. None flinched. No tension buzzed through their bodies. They were all post-selection soldiers, volunteers conditioned for neural integration with Trident systems. Their minds pulsed alongside machine learning, interpreting tactical data as if it were thought. Emotion was a choice. A discarded one. Lieutenant Eris, overseeing external analysis, noted fluctuations in one alien ship's reactor field. Their emission cycle isn't stabilizing. They're overclocking sensors. Trying to peel back our hull. Reyes nodded. Let them try. They wouldn't find anything. Trident's hull wasn't armor in the traditional sense. It existed across fractional dimensions, its material signature changing with each ping. The more one scanned, the less they understood. It wasn't cloaked, it was conceptually evasive. Built from failure simulations Earth had endured for centuries. Each alloy, every equation etched into its frame, forged in the crucible of human collapse. Humanity didn't design ships to win wars. They designed ships that could end them. Across the central interface, the alien formation held its position. They hadn't advanced. They were waiting. For what? No one aboard Trident cared. No countdown. No caution. Trident simply moved forward, unwavering. Reyes adjusted the tempo of the ship's internal systems by 0.08%. That minor shift altered every timing protocol on board. Instantly, the ship recalibrated its silent battlefield footprint, enough to distort passive scans and render their assumptions invalid. To the aliens, it would appear as a glitch. In reality, it was a reminder: you are not observing a thing, you are being observed. The AI grid fed Reyes a full combat profile of the fleet. No known exotic weapons. Standard plasma turrets. Shield harmonics low-frequency optimized. Fine against projectiles, useless against Trident systems. Tactics based on predictability. Their doctrines mirrored early Terran naval philosophies. Static defense. Rotational patrols. Layered firing cones. All weak. All slow. All obsolete. They had no psychological armor. That was the flaw. Reyes remembered Earth's last war. Not against other nations, but against extinction itself. Civil collapse. Economic erasure. Climate systems turning hostile. And then unity, not through peace, but through shared desperation. From that came the Trident Initiative. One ship. One response. A vessel that didn't merely kill. It ensured the end of repetition. No fleets. No grand declarations. Just one hand. And when that hand moved, no enemy stood again. The alien commander had sent a warning shot. Trident had logged it. No damage. No escalation. Just proof. They had taken the bait. Reyes logged the action. It was the first official aggression. Now protocol shifted. Trident adapted. Defensive posture deactivated. Response logic activated. Not vengeance. Not fear. Calculation. The crew received no verbal command. None was necessary. Their neural bonds translated the captain's presence into operational directive. Across all stations, systems began priming in silence. Not loud. Not flashing. Just a hum of readiness, like the still breath before a pulse of thunder. One ensign reviewed an intercepted alien communique. Translated roughly, it read, "Why only one ship?" A few crew members almost smiled. Why one ship? Because Trident was not the start of the fight. It was the last word. Reyes locked eyes with the projection of the enemy fleet one last time. He knew they wouldn't understand until it was far too late. Not because they were unintelligent, but because they believed strength came in numbers. Because they still believed wars were won through mass. Because they didn't yet comprehend the cost of misjudging a species that learned war through its own extinction. Humanity had sent just one ship. And that ship had no intention of losing. The alien fleet maintained formation, scanning the human vessel every 6 seconds. On the bridge of the command ship, strategist Vile reviewed the incoming data with increasing irritation. The human ship continued its deliberate course, still broadcasting no identifiers, no responses, no changes in speed or attitude. It was not maneuvering evasively. It did not seek clearance. It simply advanced. Vile ordered another scan cycle, this time with deep spectrum resonance layering. The results were less than helpful. Trident's hull returned contradictory signals. The outer plating fluctuated under observation, responding to sensor pulses with mirrored distortions. Its thermal profile spiked and dipped without physical cause. Its gravity displacement registered heavier than it should, yet had no mass anomalies detectable. The systems on board the alien flagship flagged the results as corrupted, but Vile knew better. Something was wrong. Or worse, intentional. He summoned his senior analyst, a neural-augmented tactician who had broken formation to run isolated data models. Her first words confirmed his unease. This ship is not behaving within any parameter we've encountered. No registration, no formation logic, no passive emissions for communication. She paused before adding, "And it's letting us watch." That last part mattered. Most species, when outnumbered or scanned by an armed fleet, shielded themselves, rerouted signals, or at least attempted misdirection. This ship didn't. It moved like it was immune to curiosity. The more they observed it, the more it seemed to present what they expected to see. Vile ordered deeper AI prediction models. Results came back inconclusive, with statistical probabilities that defied logic. One predictive engine returned a single result: let it pass. The AI was shut down and rebooted. From across the fleet, reports echoed similar problems. Targeting sensors experienced phantom echoes. Mass readings fluctuated. Attempted code pings returned structured static, not gibberish, but data dense enough to be its own language. Every time they tried to lock the Trident in a classification matrix, it slipped through. The Council back on Viral Prime demanded updates. Vile reported that the Terran vessel had yet to respond, yet to maneuver aggressively, and yet to declare its intent. He recommended caution. The Council disagreed. They believed this was theater. Posturing. They reminded him that this Terran civilization had never fielded fleets, never participated in interstellar negotiations, and had only been observed on the galactic periphery. Their silence is a sign of uncertainty, the counselor said with conviction. Apply pressure. Vile knew better than to argue. He relayed the command. A secondary ship approached Trident's projected path, performing an overt scan with weapons online. Still, no response. Not even a course correction. It was as if the ship didn't acknowledge the presence of the fleet at all. Among Vile's crew, murmurs began to spread. Not fear. Not yet. But discomfort. The kind that builds in the space between knowledge and instinct. The more they studied the ship, the more it challenged assumptions. Its energy output was consistent, not rising with proximity or fleet tension. Its systems didn't hum with aggression. They pulsed with finality. A junior comms officer ran a diagnostic on their observation logs. What he found he brought directly to Vile. Sir, our sensor records of the last 30 minutes have frame inconsistencies. At first, I thought it was timing lag from our processors, but I cross-referenced with the fleet net. They all show the same skips. Vile leaned forward. Explain. The officer's voice tightened. We're missing seconds. Not corrupted. Deleted. As if something removed frames of time from our entire sensor grid, and left everything else intact. Vile stared at the display. Can you recover them? No, sir. It's as if those moments never existed. Silence fell over the command bridge. Across the viewing deck, Trident moved without deviation, crossing the last of the border markers and entering disputed space. Not a word from the humans. Not a single transmission. Just progress. Some of the fleet's higher AI subsystems began logging strategic anomalies. Movement pattern, unaltered. Engagement strategy, undefined. Confidence level, beyond reasonable. Simulation engagement losses, 97% in favor of the human vessel, given current formations. That prediction was rejected by the strategic board. Clearly a computational error. No single vessel could outperform a council fleet. Not in any probability worth considering. Still, backups were ordered. Power redistributions adjusted. Weapons went live on 3 cruisers. Just in case. The alien ships moved slowly to surround the human vessel. It continued forward. Unflinching. Unwavering. Uninterested. Vile reviewed the compiled psychological model on humanity, updated from previous observation reports. It described humans as reactive, emotionally volatile, often aggressive under pressure but quick to seek negotiation when outmatched. That model had been based on outdated encounters, diplomatic intercepts, open broadcasts, low-orbit skirmishes. Not this. Not silence. He asked for live analysis from the sentience mapping AI, a system designed to read intent from behavioral data. The response came after a long pause. Subject exhibits pre-engagement certainty. Behavior aligns with predicted action dominance. Probability of bluff, less than 2%. Recommend strategic disengagement or neutral dialogue. The bridge quieted. Vile turned toward the viewing window, where the Trident drifted into the very center of their formation, positioning itself as if it belonged there. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he whispered to no one in particular, "This isn't a show of force." The AI spoke again, unprompted. "Correct. This is a demonstration." And the last report before the silence was filed into the fleet's archive. Trident has no escort. It needs none. Inside the command nexus of the Trident, the incoming message from the alien fleet was received without urgency. The translation engine processed it instantly, routing it into the primary thread without priority flag. Captain Reyes reviewed it with the same dispassion as a weather report. The tone of the message was controlled, formal, projecting assumed superiority. It was the kind of message designed to intimidate without appearing hostile. To someone unfamiliar with conflict, it might have sounded diplomatic. But to Reyes, It was the language of a species used to obedience. They were still treating humanity like a lesser civilization, still convinced their position justified demands. The message was archived. No reply was sent. The aliens hadn't yet realized that silence was the reply. Across the tactical interface, Trident systems continued to accumulate behavioral data from the fleet. Algorithms mapped out how each ship adjusted its posture following the broadcast. Which vessels subtly moved toward better firing solutions. Which ones flinched under passive scans. Which one had primed its engines in anticipation of pursuit. Every micro-adjustment revealed their training, doctrine, and fear thresholds. They didn't see Trident as a threat, but they had begun to feel something beneath their calculations. Not yet fear, but the absence of understanding. Reyes ran a silent command through his console. Trident interpreted it instantly. Defensive automation was reprioritized. Not because of immediate danger, but because the message signaled intent. The aliens wanted justification. They were probing for reason to escalate. So be it. Humanity had learned long ago that the best way to defuse uncertainty was not to meet it with panic, but with absolute clarity. The next time the aliens scanned Trident, they would find slight changes. Power readings would appear refined. Energy signatures cleaner. Mass balance more centered. They'd assume it was an adjustment, maybe a systems recalibration. What they wouldn't realize is that Trident had shifted from observation mode to first-layer engagement alignment. No shields. No weapons hot. Just posture. And posture meant everything. No response from the alien fleet followed. They waited, assuming the message had been received and would provoke reaction. But it hadn't. Trident never played into expected timelines. Humans had learned through countless wars and disasters that rushing to answer someone else's expectations was the fastest way to lose. From the psychological analysis deck, the neural AI issued a new pattern report. Based on observed formation behavior and historical analogs, the alien fleet structure followed dominance signaling typical of empire-rooted civilizations. High-value assets surrounded by layers of expendable craft. Aggression masked as protocol. Standard practice for species that rarely encountered equals. But the AI flagged a note. They were broadcasting their hierarchy openly. Reyes reviewed the flag, then issued a single data pulse outward, unencrypted, brief, containing only coordinates and a timestamp. It was a message, but not for dialogue. It was a marker. The aliens would detect it, trace the coordinates, and find themselves staring at one of their own forward recon positions. It had been there earlier. Now it wasn't. The Trident didn't erase it. It had simply made it, not return. Reyes didn't need them to panic. He only needed them to understand that observation worked both ways. They had stared at his ship, and now something had stared back. He had given them a glimpse into consequence. On the alien side, response was immediate. Formation shifted subtly. Non-command vessels expanded their distance from centerline. Decoy maneuvers were initiated. It was all silent, unspoken panic. Reyes logged it. Expected. Humanity didn't bluff. That was an advantage. Bluffing required you to pretend strength. Humanity didn't need to pretend. It had earned its caution through thousands of years clawing forward against extinction. Earth was not peaceful because it was enlightened. It was peaceful because it had buried its chaos deep beneath a collective scar tissue of war, collapse, and rebirth. Other species had evolved through stability. Humanity had survived through defiance. The alien fleet still hadn't responded to the coordinates. Still no message. They were analyzing. That meant they didn't know what had happened. That was the intended effect. Not intimidation. Just doubt. Enough to erode certainty. Enough to make them realize that their understanding was incomplete. And incomplete understanding breeds hesitation. Trident's internal systems recalculated the fleet's probable attack vectors. Models showed a 32% reduction in probability of preemptive fire since the last broadcast. Reyes didn't smile, but the data was satisfactory. A lesser captain might have escalated then, taken the opportunity to strike. But Reyes was patient. Earth didn't build Trident for shows of force. It was a message. And messages weren't yelled. They were delivered with precision. As per protocol, Trident began emitting faint pulses, not as communication, but to echo the fleet's own sensor frequencies back at them. It was like holding up a mirror and showing them their own fears. The alien ships began picking up their own patterns, distorted, folded, turned back upon them with alien fingerprints layered subtly across them. Confusion followed. Still no reply. Reyes checked the time. 10 more minutes passed. Another alien ship moved slightly off course, perhaps a scouting maneuver, perhaps a feint. Trident adjusted accordingly, not visibly, but in energy balancing and gravitational emissions. It always stayed half a step outside expectation. The last scan received by the alien fleet showed something peculiar. A new signal coming from inside Trident. Not a code, not a message. A frequency impossible to translate, but structurally harmonic with brainwave patterns used in neurointerface technology. It wasn't broadcast at them. It was broadcast through them. Several alien ships immediately cut power to sensitive receivers. Too late. The signal wasn't a weapon. It was a statement. Humans had already mapped their minds. The alien fleet sent no more messages that hour. But the silence that followed wasn't control. It was confusion. And inside that confusion, the seeds of fear took root. The Trident had spoken. Not in words. In certainty. Deep analysis scans across the alien fleet initiated simultaneously, running exhaustive breakdowns on every layer of the human vessel's composition. From orbital surveillance drones to ship-mounted resonance probes, all systems focused on peeling back the mystery of the Trident. What came back was chaos masquerading as order. Data packets contained structures that defied known materials science. The ship's hull didn't reflect scans in traditional ways. It absorbed, bent, and reinterpreted them. Multiple subsystems reported identical reflections returning with subtle data anomalies, as if the ship was studying the observers as much as it was being studied. To counter suspected interference, the Ascendancy fleet increased scanning resolution. More energy, more bandwidth, wider spectrum saturation. In most circumstances, this would overwhelm passive stealth systems. With Trident, it produced the opposite. The more detailed the scan, the less consistent the data. One layer beneath the hull showed a complex polycrystalline structure, the next showed void, then mass density equal to neutronium, then nothing at all. Each pass contradicted the last. Alarmed, the fleet science vessel conducted a full-spectrum particle exposure test, broadcasting exotic radiation to provoke a thermal or quantum reaction. Trident registered the hit, but gave back no measurable response. It did not absorb. It did not reflect. The particles vanished. No trace of interaction remained. Standard explanations collapsed under their own weight. Some suggested that the Trident's hull wasn't made of any known material, but of a composite quantum lattice that redefined itself according to the observer's method. Observation became influence. Theory became liability. Sensors also failed to identify any external weapon systems. No turrets, no barrels, no targeting dishes. Still, energy readings remained far above operational norms for a vessel of its size. One analyst proposed that Trident housed a theoretical core, not a reactor, but a machine capable of collapsing probability fields to manifest desired outcomes. The suggestion was dismissed as speculative nonsense. But when simulation models were run using that assumption, the ship's behavior made sense. At the command level, strategist Vile read each report with growing detachment. What had started as cautious curiosity was rapidly evolving into something more dangerous: uncertainty. The entire doctrine of the Ascendancy revolved around knowing an enemy before deciding to engage. They had no model for this. They had only fragments. And the more they looked, the less they understood. Linguistics divisions failed to crack the recursive AI pulses emanating intermittently from Trident central systems. At first dismissed as internal diagnostics, the signals became more complex, layered with encrypted logic chains that, when mapped, formed structures not unlike language. Not human. Not machine. Something between. Each pulse adjusted its encoding based on the sensors trying to interpret it. A responsive algorithm. A learning language. By the third cycle, the signal was no longer just bouncing back. It was penetrating through their data firewalls. One research vessel severed connection entirely, claiming the signal had begun rewriting predictive behavior subroutines. No one challenged the decision. Meanwhile, Trident's flight path remained fixed. No alterations. No acknowledgement of fleet maneuvers around it. Like a shark ignoring fish that couldn't bite. Concern escalated into quiet debate. Some proposed strategic withdrawal, suggesting that they were encountering technology beyond Tier 6 classification, possibly an AI-native vessel or temporal construct. Others argued for a more forceful probe. One shot. A light impact. Force a reaction. Still within regulations. Still not technically war. The fleet commander hesitated, and hesitation bled down through every layer of command. An internal memo circulated briefly among intelligence officers. It referenced Earth's historical conflict records. Human warfare, unlike most species, was never clean. There were no limits. When humans went to war, they did so with totality. Cities burned. Skies choked with ash. Every major global war ended only when the cost became unsustainable for everyone involved. Their final recorded war before unification had no declared victory, just silence, followed by a planet rebuilt with steel, silicon, and memory. That fact changed the tone of the conversation. Now the silence from Trident no longer appeared passive. It appeared earned. One fleet officer, young, ambitious, recommended a soft EMP burst to test shield polarity. It was approved. The moment the pulse reached Trident, it vanished. Not repelled. Not absorbed. It simply ceased to exist. Monitoring sensors confirmed an area of null interaction, a pocket of dead signal where even light bent slightly. Not a field. Not a shield. A hole in expected physics. A quiet unease began threading through the Ascendancy's command structure. No one wanted to say it aloud, but each began to feel the same truth clawing at the edges of protocol. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't misinterpretation. This was control. Trident wasn't hiding its abilities. It wasn't posturing. It was choosing what could be seen, what could be touched, what could be understood. Every piece of data they received was allowed. Every fragment of information, every scan result, every anomaly, asterisk intentional star. The implication became clear. Humanity had mastered a form of engineered perception. They had crafted a ship that filtered not just external contact, but the conceptual understanding of itself. If you didn't belong, you weren't just locked out, you were misled. Back on Viral Prime, the Council demanded tactical options. Vile could offer only one, and even that lacked certainty: wait. Watch. Reassess. The Council didn't accept that. They had never needed to. As a final measure, an advanced AI was directed to create a predictive combat model assuming worst-case parameters. It generated a scenario in which Trident responded to a fleet-wide offensive. The result? 7 seconds of conflict. 17% of the fleet destroyed. The rest disabled, drifting. Outcome: human victory with 89% probability. That model was deleted before distribution. The official line reported no threats detected. But Vile knew. They weren't studying the human ship anymore. They were walking in the dark, and it had already mapped the floor. The fleet adjusted formation with surgical precision. Trident continued its steady trajectory without deviation, yet its mere presence unbalanced protocol. The command ship's primary battery aligned a calibrated warning shot, low yield and precisely aimed to pass 200 meters off Trident's forward path. The intent was calculated, a gesture to provoke reaction without starting war. On Vile's order, the beam pulsed into space, silent, brilliant, and flawless. It never completed its path. Before the beam could fully exit its emitter array, 3 Ascendancy ships blinked out of existence. No sound. No light. No energy release. One moment they were there, fully operational, systems stable, trajectories intact, and then they weren't. Every sensor on every remaining ship reported nothing. No debris. No energy signature. No gravitational ripple. Just a sudden, absolute absence. The bridge fell into immediate chaos. Systems flagged multiple critical alerts, none of which explained what had occurred. Surveillance replays looped a frame where the ships existed, followed by a frame where the sector registered vacuum. Everything else in the area remained untouched. Space itself had not been disturbed. Only the ships were gone. Emergency protocols triggered fleet-wide diagnostic scrubs. AI nodes began processing possible causes: quantum destabilization, coordinated internal sabotage, synchronized power failure. Each was invalidated by the absence of causality. Sensors didn't register an attack. Not a single external force. Nothing had touched the ships. They simply ceased to occupy reality. One theory surfaced before being quickly suppressed, a localized spatial disjunction event, theorized in black-budget science divisions but never replicated. A weapon that didn't destroy but erased. No explosion. No radiation. No traceable origin. The fleet's weapon systems auto-shifted to full readiness. Officers across the formation demanded orders. But no one was firing. Not yet. Because firing meant confirming what they feared. That this wasn't an anomaly. This was response. Trident's course never changed. Vile stared at the latest fleet map. 3 ships removed without resistance, without declaration. He whispered to his AI liaison, "Are we under attack?" The AI responded after 0.3 seconds, negative. No aggression recorded. However, retaliation detected. The difference was not semantic. Back on the command vessel, the targeting arrays of multiple warships began recalibrating. Trident remained unscathed, still unarmed by all visual readings, still giving nothing back. But to those watching, its presence now radiated something heavier than mass. Intent. Vile reviewed internal simulations from his own defense matrix. Any offensive now carried an unacceptable risk. The next exchange might not leave ships to debrief. But waiting invited collapse of command confidence. Doing nothing would be perceived as weakness. Already, his subcommanders were sending encrypted suggestions. Withdraw. Fallback. Request higher-tier fleet support. One suggested triggering an open channel for negotiation. But what would they even negotiate? What do you offer a power that can erase without effort? Vile ordered a momentary hold on all fire directives. Meanwhile, tactical teams attempted to recreate the anomaly, hoping to find a technical explanation, an exploitable weakness, an identifiable mechanism. They failed. Everything about the Trident remained locked behind incomprehensible equations. One physicist submitted an emergency report theorizing the ship had altered its own gravitational alignment at a quantum scale, phase-shifting itself and dragging surrounding matter out of dimensional sync. It read more like theoretical fantasy than a weapons report. The conclusion chilled everyone. The Trident did not fire. It decided. And the universe complied. Fleet Command began issuing emergency encryption updates. Signal scrambling protocols reinitialized. Data isolation measures activated to prevent external AI intrusion. But even with full cyber lockdown, there was a rising sense that none of it mattered. Every move they made, every new protocol engaged, Trident seemed to have already anticipated. This wasn't just preparation. It was inevitability. At the moment of maximum tension, an alien ship on the outer edge of the formation opened fire. Unordered. A plasma lance streaked toward Trident. The crew aboard the rogue vessel had broken under pressure, reacting from fear, from the growing weight of their own helplessness. The projectile reached Trident in 1.3 seconds. It never connected. Instead, the bolt fractured mid-flight, splintering into a geometric lattice of light before disintegrating into particles. The pattern it formed resembled a human neural map, almost mocking. Trident responded by shifting position by only 0.002 degrees. A movement so slight it would have been invisible if not for the fact that every ship's trajectory updated instantly to reflect it. That tiny shift caused gravitational recalibrations across the entire fleet's positional data. 3 ships reported navigational ghosting. 2 sensors blacked out temporarily. Trident's response had not been a defense. It had been a demonstration of positional dominance. The statement was clear: I know where you are, I know how you move, and I know how to make you disappear. Then, for the first time, Trident transmitted a signal. Not a message. A sound. It echoed across all channels, nonverbal, a harmonic resonance that matched no known language but triggered emotional response centers in multiple alien brains. It felt like something ancient and terrible. It sounded like a funeral bell ringing for someone still alive. Fleet Command silenced all external audio immediately, but the damage had been done. Dozens of crew across ships logged psychological feedback spikes. One ship isolated its bridge crew after suspected panic-induced mutiny. Commanders whispered rumors that the sound carried memory, Personal fragments dredged from deep cognition, private losses, buried guilt. Weaponized empathy. Still no words from the humans. Still no proof of weapons. Just results. One fleet psychologist submitted a silent advisory to command: do not engage. This is not war. This is a correction. Vile overrode attack protocols. He ordered fleet-wide power redistribution to defensive grids. He activated maximum long-range jump capability. And quietly, with no broadcast, he sent a message to Viral Prime. We are no longer the observers. Recommend immediate strategic re-evaluation. This ship is not a contact vessel. It is a precedent. On board Trident, the crew maintained silence. Not out of fear, not as a ritual, but because silence allowed clarity. The ship systems pulsed with controlled feedback loops, quietly cycling data across neural sync nodes and distributed perception networks. Every crew member was connected, not just to the vessel, but to each other. They weren't monitoring the fleet for threats. They were observing for decisions. Because that's what mattered. Not the firing of weapons, but the decision behind it. That was where true warfare lived. In the mind. In the hesitation before action. In the falter just before command. The alien fleet had already crossed that line. Trident's adaptive logic engine classified the event with brutal precision. 3 ships erased, 1 hostile fire attempt neutralized, 1 fleet-wide ripple of behavioral instability now expanding outward. The model was stable. Human patience, however, was not infinite. Earth's directives were clear: do not engage unless provoked beyond protocol thresholds. The thresholds had already been surpassed. The moment had come, not for retaliation, but for demonstration of final clarity. Inside the logic core, response trees collapsed into a singular track. The AI overseeing battlefield synthesis terminated all alternate projections. No more waiting. No more evaluation. Engagement would not be declared. It would simply occur. In silence. Not for destruction. For certainty. At that same instant, Trident's internal quantum gyroscope realigned by a fraction of a degree. The shift was imperceptible to most forms of observation, but to the alien fleet, it triggered a second wave of disarray. Positional tracking across 3 vessels failed simultaneously. Targeting systems scrambled to find orientation. Long-range sensors started reporting duplicate echoes of Trident in multiple locations. Every attempt to lock on failed. Not because Trident cloaked, but because their systems no longer knew what Trident meant. It had redefined its profile in real time. No longer a vessel. Now a concept. Meanwhile, within the alien flagship, Vile's command staff moved from procedural execution to controlled panic. Dozens of low-level officers submitted sensor data that made no physical sense. One screen displayed Trident approaching at subliminal speeds, another displayed it stationary, a third showed no object at all, just telemetry confusion. Reports from various ships began including subjective feedback, crew members claiming to have heard voices, seen brief flashes of memory, even experienced time delays in their consciousness. These were not hallucinations. They were byproducts of exposure. Back in the observation chamber, Vile received an encrypted diagnostic from their lead data specialist, containing a simple, horrifying assessment: contact with this vessel is not technological. It is cognitive. In short, the ship was not hacking systems. It was interacting with perception itself. Reading emotional profiles, cognitive rhythms, predictive patterns. Not just responding to them, steering them star. The implications cracked the foundation of the fleet's strategic model. If engagement happened not through weapons, but through thought, then every assumption the Ascendancy made about combat was now obsolete. Vile ordered all fleet ships into staggered retreat vectors. The command wasn't phrased as surrender. Just repositioning. Temporary reassessment. But the movement was obvious. Backpedaling, sector by sector. Trident didn't pursue. It didn't need to. Instead, a second signal activated, this time visual. A projection of human history, stitched together from fragments, flashing across every comm system in the alien fleet. Ancient Earth wars. Collapse and rebirth. Fires over cities. Starvation. Flood. Civil wars. Space colonization. The human timeline was displayed not as glory, but as a wound that never quite healed. It wasn't propaganda. It was confession. And then it cut to the Trident Initiative itself, a meeting of silent men and women, not smiling, not celebrating, but sitting in a steel chamber, heads bowed. This was no war council. It was a reckoning. They hadn't built Trident to conquer. They had built it so that war would never again be left to interpretation. Not a fleet. Not a strategy. Just one final tool to show the galaxy what a last line really looked like. The broadcast ended. No message followed. Among the alien fleet, decisions fractured. Some captains disengaged completely. Others tried to stabilize their crews. One vessel fired a single torpedo, likely out of reflex. It vanished mid-flight. Not destroyed. Not intercepted. Simply gone. Once again, nothing exploded. Nothing screamed. It was as if even aggression was being denied permission. Back on Trident, the AI compiled its final behavioral mapping. The ascendancy was broken, not physically, but philosophically. Their chain of logic was in ruins. They had built their empire on power projection, on patterns of escalation, on calculated responses. None of those tools applied here. They had assumed they were meeting a rival. Instead, they had met their own irrelevance. Trident adjusted speed. Not an acceleration. Just a symbolic shift, advancing past the final alignment point of the fleet formation, crossing their field of dominance unopposed. Not a single ship moved to block it. Not one powered weapons again. And in that moment, humanity didn't win a battle. It proved that no battle was necessary. As Trident crossed into unclaimed space, its systems logged the encounter as closed. No casualties recorded aboard. No retaliatory strikes issued. Mission objective marked complete, psychological resolution achieved. Captain Reyes finally spoke. Close the chapter. They'll never forget it. And with that, humanity continued forward. Alone. Not as conquerors, but as proof. The Ascendancy's fleet drifted in reformation patterns, but there was no cohesion left. Command signals repeated in loops, captains issuing orders to crews too disoriented to respond, AI subsystems quietly flagging contradictory sensor data that could no longer be resolved. The shape of Trident in their databases had already begun to blur. Every ship had a different interpretation of what it had seen, heard, or felt. Some retained the physical parameters, mass, velocity, location. Others logged abstract patterns, unreadable geometry, or sensory anomalies translated as colors, pulses, or internal memory artifacts. No two records matched. There was no consensus on what they had encountered. There was only absence where certainty had once lived. A high-priority data stream from Viral Prime cut through the fleet's overwhelmed network. A request, not a command. An inquiry laced in diplomatic framing. The Council wanted a formal summary. Was contact successful? Was threat identified? Was the situation resolved? Vile stared at the prompt in silence, the words hollow. He had no language for what had transpired. No context to offer. The protocols he had relied on were now inert. The most advanced strategic minds of the Ascendancy had trained for every known contact scenario, including hostile civilizations. But no model existed for an entity that simply denied the premise of conflict altogether. Trident had not disabled them. Had not conquered them. It had walked through their formation like through smoke. He sent no reply. On the edge of the fleet, the last trailing vessel began suffering system degradation. Not from damage, but from an inability to stabilize its internal logic flow. The ship's AI had overwritten several control routines to avoid recursive prediction spirals introduced by the exposure to Trident's emission pattern. The crew shut down half its systems and initiated manual backups. Their conclusion: proximity to Trident caused epistemic dissonance. The mind could no longer trust what it perceived as real. As the fleet tried to recover structure, Trident continued forward. Not evasively. Not with aggression. With full visibility, passive systems humming, engine trails clean and deliberate. It did not rush. It did not look back. The message had already been written. The response, if any, was now in the hands of those left behind. Vile watched from the bridge as Trident disappeared beyond sensor range. He'd seen ships retreat. He'd seen them warp out, explode, fragment, burn. But he had never seen a ship exit reality without bending it. That was what Trident had done. Not by altering physics, but by altering assumption. For the first time in his long career, he couldn't calculate what humanity wanted. No resources had been demanded. No territory claimed. No communication issued. The erasure of 3 ships had no follow-up. The psychological disruption had no terms. Even the encoded projections they'd received, visions of Earth's past, contained no request for recognition or fear. Humanity had simply shown them the price of misunderstanding. A subcommander approached with new data projections. Updated fleet cohesion maps. Loss estimates if conflict resumed. Vile waved them away. There was no engagement to assess anymore. What they had faced was not war. It was isolation enforced by absolute difference. On Trident, the mission thread completed its run. Every metric achieved. Observation logged. Response assessed. No retaliation required. The next phase of its journey resumed uninterrupted. It no longer tracked the alien fleet. That chapter had been processed, classified, and filed. Humanity did not seek apologies. Humanity did not care to be understood. They had learned through their own mistakes that peace, to be real, must not depend on comprehension. It must depend on certainty. And Trident had delivered it, an unflinching warning not coded in fire or sound, but wrapped in the certainty that if humanity ever did speak, it would not be to ask. The higher echelons of the ascendancy struggled to realign their diplomatic stance. No embassy had been attacked. No territory lost. No material value threatened. By all existing parameters, the incident was anomalous. The event, unprecedented. There was no legislation for a civilization that didn't seek acknowledgement. What made it worse was the fact that Trident's course led away from the ascendancy. It hadn't come to their doorstep to challenge them. It had passed through their space as if their relevance was circumstantial. And that, more than any display of power, was what caused fear to bloom in the heart of their hierarchy. One of the senior political advisors on Viral Prime issued a quiet directive to archive all Trident data under strategic black classification. Internal communications would refer to the incident only as Contact Variant Echo 1. Nothing more. Any attempt to revisit the event would require triple-tier clearance and council vote. They did not want this spreading. But it would. The crews had already seen too much. The officers had already spoken too often in private. And word among empires moved fast, especially when it tasted of humility. A nearby neutral system sent a probe to scan the edges of where Trident had passed. The probe returned one image before failing completely, a single frame showing space, flat and empty, except for a faint silhouette that appeared both near and impossibly distant. Its outline changed depending on angle. Some said it resembled a spear. Others, a gate. No instruments could verify it. The probe stopped responding. That was the last thing recorded before silence. Across ascendancy military channels, whispers emerged. Not of invasion. Not of revenge. But of something far more difficult to digest. Respect. Not the kind born of diplomacy. The kind born when you glimpse the void, and realize something within it is watching, and choosing not to act. Trident was not a fleet. Not a doctrine. Not a symbol. It was proof that humanity had no interest in being invited to the galactic table. Because they had already decided they didn't need one. While the ascendancy scrambled to contain internal fallout, ripple effects had already begun beyond their jurisdiction. Allied observers from neighboring star empires, quietly monitoring the incident through distant relays and passive intercepts, reviewed fragmented data streams and corrupted visuals. Their conclusions were unclear, but all had come to the same private understanding. Something had occurred that defied interpretation. Trident had moved through ascendancy space with no warning, no dialogue, and no measurable loss to its integrity. What should have sparked diplomatic chaos instead triggered silence. That silence became the most telling signal of all. In the political backchannels of the Dithari Collective, analysts downgraded ascendancy military rating from apex tier to conditional power. Not because of casualties, but because of behavior. They had allowed a foreign ship to cross their strategic core, provoke system instability, and exit unchallenged. It wasn't defeat. It was worse. It was irrelevance confirmed by inaction. The IRIC syndicate, known for exploiting instability, dispatched covert envoys not to investigate Trident, but to determine whether Earth posed an opportunity or an existential blind spot. Their early reports echoed a disturbing theme: no historical record of humanity behaving like any known Tier 6 species. Humans didn't posture. They didn't escalate. And now, apparently, they didn't explain either. That was more dangerous than any declared doctrine. Predictability kept peace. Earth had become unpredictable. Far from all this, Trident advanced, unburdened by the noise of interpretation. Its crew didn't engage in celebratory briefings or tactical reviews. The mission had never been conquest. The command logs didn't even include terms like victory or deterrence. The outcome was filed under operational clarity achieved. The nature of Trident's journey was not linear. It was a sequence of calculated entries into untested systems where assumptions dominated authority. Earth didn't intend to control the galaxy. It intended to collapse every illusion built upon false superiority. The next system Trident passed through contained no military fleets. It was a fringe hub of trade and diplomatic relay stations. Upon detecting the vessel, local traffic control attempted standard contact protocols. Trident ignored them entirely. They broadcast no ID, no route validation, no trade certification. Yet their trajectory cut clean through 3 sovereignty zones without pause. The local defense units hesitated to engage, having already decrypted fragments of the Ascendancy's encrypted post-event logs. They'd seen the part about the erasures. They'd seen the part about epistemic failure. And they weren't eager to join that list. Instead, they watched. And watching Trident became a form of confession. Not because of what it did, but because of what it refused to do. Where most ships navigated by broadcast, Trident navigated by certainty. Its path was chosen long before anyone could intervene. It didn't scan its surroundings. It moved as if it already knew them. That kind of confidence didn't come from arrogance. It came from experience built atop a civilization that had crawled through extinction and engineered something sharper than dominance. One of the scientific councils monitoring Trident's path issued an internal theory: humans had developed a vessel that no longer required confrontation. Its mere presence was a psychological mechanism. The theory became known as the obsolescence principle, the idea that Trident wasn't meant to win wars, but to end the need to fight them. The Ascendancy's silence only amplified the theory. There were no retaliatory deployments, no public statements, not even a hint of interstellar tension. Their fleet had retracted, and their leaders had stopped speaking. That was not protocol. That was reverence wrapped in caution. Some smaller civilizations began sending encrypted messages toward Earth. Not out of fear, but curiosity. None were answered. No acknowledgments returned. Earth's silence wasn't isolationist, it was structural. They had no interest in negotiation because they had no need for validation. And still Trident moved forward. It had passed 7 core systems in 3 weeks without a single interdiction. No scans had pierced its hull. No signals had penetrated its defenses. And most importantly, no one dared to replicate the Ascendancy's mistake. Every passing civilization adjusted its stance the moment Trident appeared. Schedules shifted. Military exercises paused. Diplomatic vessels rerouted. No confrontation was declared, but space bent to Trident's path like gravity to mass. At a high-level summit held in secret by a coalition of Tier 5 and 6 powers, an agenda item was added: Earth's silent offensive doctrine. Representatives speculated about intentions, capabilities, fleet size, and strategic goals. All admitted the truth beneath their speculation: no one knew. Earth had never broadcast its doctrine. It had never sought empire, alliance, or tribute. Its only message had come wrapped in steel and absolute composure. And the message was this: we won't ask for space. We'll move through it. And you'll choose whether or not to stand in the way. That left only 2 options: engage the unknown and risk annihilation of understanding, or yield to what couldn't be defined. Trident crossed into another system on its projected course. Automated defenses went offline temporarily. Civilian traffic halted for 90 minutes. No incident occurred. And after it passed, life resumed. But no one forgot the stillness it left behind. In the end, Trident didn't need a fleet to follow it. Its wake was wide enough. Earth never issued a statement. No press release, no broadcasted claim, no threat coded in ritual language. In the wake of Trident's passage through ascendancy space and the quiet reshaping of interstellar behavior, humanity remained silent. The unified Terran Assembly held no emergency sessions. Their fleets stayed in dock. No ambassador toured the fringe colonies to explain intent. For every civilization that had been watching, waiting for a narrative to form, this silence became a defining element. The galaxy had always expected declarations, ultimatums, some kind of political script. But Earth offered none. What they had done with Trident wasn't theater, it was doctrine executed without rehearsal. Back-channel traffic across the Tier 6 networks surged with analysis. Speculation ran in classified memos, shared only between trusted circles. Yet no consensus formed. Some believed Trident was one of one, a psychological weapon disguised as a flagship. Others believed it was simply the first to leave Sol, the first visible element of a force already growing behind closed orbits. A minority feared something worse, that Trident wasn't a weapon or a warning, but a signature. A proof of concept, heralding a new strategic model where human power was no longer measured by fleet size or energy yield, but by its capacity to shift reality through perception. The oldest powers, those who remembered when space had first become a shared domain, understood best what had just changed. For millennia, power had rested on three pillars: mass, energy, and influence. All were visible. All could be tracked, charted, measured, challenged. Earth had removed that visibility. It had replaced observable force with silent, irreversible consequence. That was what frightened the galaxy. Not destruction, but irrelevance. Earth didn't come to negotiate parity. It had come to end the equation. A year passed. No other Trident-class ship appeared. No follow-up action occurred. No policy shifted from Earth's side. But everywhere else, the shift was tectonic. Border disputes between minor empires quieted down. Expansionary campaigns were paused under review. Military exercises near human sectors were cancelled. Trade routes were adjusted to avoid even peripheral zones that might fall within Trident's projected path. Fear wasn't what spread, it was recalibration. The smartest minds stopped asking what humanity might do next and started asking what they already knew. Because the only force that moved without resistance was the one already certain of the outcome. Deep inside the ascendancy, a new academic doctrine took root in their military academies. They called it cognitive supremacy, the ability to control battlefields not by firepower, but by controlling what opponents could or could not perceive. And Trident had proven the concept by simply existing. Their ships were redesigned to avoid rigid hierarchies in their formations. New war simulators removed predictability from command decisions. And most importantly, every officer was trained with one axiom: if you ever see a ship like Trident again, assume you've already lost. Among the outer colonies, rumors of the ship became mythologized. Stories filtered through merchant networks and explorer guilds. They spoke of the Silent Blade, the ship that walked through an empire and erased memory as much as mass. Some believed the ship had a crew of dead men, others that it was a machine god-born from the ashes of Earth's final war. None of it was accurate. All of it was accepted. Because myths require less proof than behavior, and Trident's behavior had done more than any story ever could. Inside Earth's central archives, the ship's logs remained sealed. Not hidden. Not classified. Just sealed. Accessible only to those with operational need. And that need currently did not exist. Humanity had no standing wars. No active conquests. No political aspirations beyond continued survival and exploration. What they had sent with Trident was not a demand, but an answer to a question the galaxy hadn't asked yet. What happens when the species most familiar with chaos no longer fears it? Because Trident had not conquered chaos. It had accepted it, weaponized it, and then made it unnecessary. Some feared Earth was planning to escalate. To build more. To expand this doctrine into a silent fleet. But those who understood Earth psychology knew better. Trident wasn't the beginning of something. It was the end of everything that required repetition. Earth would not build another ship like it. They didn't need to. Once is enough when it works perfectly. And Trident had worked perfectly. In the farthest reaches of known space, a small science vessel belonging to a non-aligned research council encountered a data echo, an imprint left in space where no mass remained. It traced back to the final known coordinates of Trident. After analysis, The team submitted their findings to their superiors under a simple title, Residual Presence, Persistent Influence Model. Their final line read, **, there is no ship. There is only the expectation of one. **. That expectation was now everywhere. Trident had vanished, but no one believed it was gone. And that was its final act. To move through the galaxy once and make the galaxy move forever.